Hey guys, and welcome back to my channel. Today we are going to be going over one of my favorite book tropes to read recently, which is enemies to lovers. And I have compiled a list to give you guys my top recommendations of books that I've read recently in this trope that I wanted to recommend to you guys. So if you haven't already, please be sure to give this video a thumbs up if this is the type of content you like, and be sure to hit that subscribe button down below. And without further ado, let's jump into the video. So this book trope, I feel, has gone through the ages as like being timeless. It's in movies, it's in TV shows. It is a type of trope that, at least for myself and maybe for other women or just people in general, it is almost a fantasy, because in reality it's very unlikely to fall in love with somebody who is like your sworn enemy or who's like the complete opposite from you. Someone that you swore to yourself you would dislike forever, and then you end up getting together at the end. It's just very passionate, but it's also very unrealistic. And I think reading books like that puts you in this fantasy world of possibilities of what could be. And whether or not it can happen or not in real life, I think at this point is just irrelevant, because it's just really fun to read. And I wanted to start off this video with probably the originator of them all, the enemies to lovers that everyone knows and loves, and that is Pride and Prejudice. Now, Pride and Prejudice is probably my favorite book of all time. I have read this book so many times. I have several copies. I love the movie, both the 1995 version and the 2005 Keira Knightley version. And honestly, I think this has really set the foundation for every enemies to lovers book that has ever been made, especially in movies and TVs and everything. Like, we have the main heroine who is really kind, kind of keeps to herself, and immediately meets this grumpy man who takes one look at her and judges her right away and says like kind of not nice things about her and her family. She says that she's never going to like him. They have like a weird relationship that stems from a lot of prejudices on both sides. And then at the end, obviously, they get together at the end, and it is a great story about family values, about societal values, about overcoming your own prejudices, looking beyond the surface of somebody's like exterior and what they present themselves, how they present themselves to the world, and then uncovering someone underneath that is someone that you can be with and love and cherish. And it is so dang good. It is so good. If you haven't read this book, if you haven't watched the movies, please do for me, because it's so good. So we're starting off really strong with this book. Now I really want to read it. Maybe I'll reread it over the winter. Yeah. Then we have another historical book or historical romance, and that is The Viscount Who Loved Me by Julia Quinn. Again, this has been adapted to TV. This is a TV show on Netflix, season 2, and The Viscount Who Loved Me centers around a viscount who has to get married, and he is determined to just marry whoever at this point. He wants only the best though, and the heroine in this actually is the sister of the person who he is engaged to. So the sister does not like the Viscount, who is Anthony, and they butt heads throughout the entire book. It is a really cute enemies to lovers romance. We have Anthony, who is determined to get married, try to become a man that his father would want him to be, and not really thinking about love. He's just trying to get a marriage of convenience, pretty much. Whereas the sister of the woman who he is engaged to really just wants her sister to be happy and to be in love and find love, and she knows that Anthony is not that person for her. But what she doesn't know is that she is actually falling for Anthony herself. And so it's a fun book. This is probably my favorite Julia Quinn book. It is a good time, again, because it's enemies to lovers and it is a historical romance. So if you like that setting, then you will enjoy this book. Then we have a recent read of mine that was a fantasy, like a YA fantasy, and that is Dance of Thieves. And this book is really cool because, like, right in the beginning of the book, these two individuals are like quite literally joined at the hip, and they do not like each other. One is a soldier for this other kingdom who is set to infiltrate this man's city and look for something that she has been required by her queen to discover. And so she has a lot of secrets. He is the new lord of his little city area. His father just passed away, and he is young, but he is ready to step into his father's footsteps, take over. And so they are enemies. They don't know about each other. They both have secrets that they're hiding from one another, and they are like linked together. They escaped from something, so they broke free, and it is just them trying to survive, learning about each other, and trying to move past their own secrets, their own trauma. And it is a really cool story. It has a lot of fantasy elements, political elements. There isn't that much romance in this book, but the romance that is there is definitely enemies to lovers, and I do recommend it to anyone really. Even if you're not really a romance reader, I would recommend this book series or duology to anyone, because it is a good fantasy story in general. So there's not too much romance, but the romance that is in here is definitely, I would consider, enemies to lovers. Probably everyone's favorite fantasy enemies to lovers book right now is A Court of Mist and Fury by Sarah J. Maas. This is book 2 in the ACOTAR series, and it is definitely probably one of my favorites as well. We have the main character, Feyre, who is a mortal, and she is thrust into this Fey world, but she is sentenced to like live there in book 1, and they go through a lot of things. But book 2 centers around her and a Fae that do not get along. They are enemies, they do not like each other, and again, we have people learning about each other, uncovering secrets about themselves that they've hidden, going past the like cold exterior that they set for themselves, end up falling for each other. And I feel like it's a very common way for these enemies to lovers books to kind of conclude, is that they break down barriers of these individuals, and then we learn that there's more to them than meets the eye, and there's a reason why they're grumpy or why they hate each other, and it's either because of like society or family rules, and yeah, so I love this book. It is so good. It's a big one, but it's worth reading the series. Highly recommend. If you haven't already, definitely check this out. But book 2 is definitely your enemies to lovers trope. Then we have another fantasy book. This is A Touch of Darkness, which is a Hades and Persephone retelling. And obviously with Hades and Persephone, you're gonna have enemies to lovers. We have Hades, who is the god of the underworld, and then we have Persephone, who is the goddess of spring. So we have light, we have dark, we have good, we have evil, and then we have a lot of misunderstood people with a lot of potential for growth and character development. We have a fun setting that takes place in like this kind of urban modern day world, but with like the Greek gods and goddesses living amongst us. And so it has a lot of really cool elements to this book series. Book 1 centers around Hades and Persephone meeting, getting into this arrangement where she has to live in the underworld with him. She doesn't like him. She has a lot that she is unable to do. She is a goddess, but she doesn't have magic. And so it kind of just goes from there, their relationship, how it all came to be. We have a really cool situation here where Persephone and Hades get into a deal together where she has to live in the underworld and create life, or else she would lose her freedom together. So right from the get-go, we have two people that really put themselves in a not great situation. And so you can imagine Persephone would not be really liking Hades at this point. We have a lot of enemies to lovers banter and angst and kind of hurting each other back and forth. And then their relationship just grows from there. It is really fun to read. I love Hades' character, how it's so like misunderstood, and there's more to him than meets the eye. And then I really like Persephone, how she's such a good character as well, and she's able to kind of pick herself up from her own bootstraps and not become her mother. And yeah, it's really cool. I like the series. There is a lot more spice to this one than the other books that I'm mentioning in this video, but if you like kind of like dark romance, if you like Greek mythology, then definitely pick up this book. It is a fun time. Okay, then we have A King of Battle and Blood, which is another fantasy romance book, and it's also written by Scarlett Clair, who is the author of A Touch of Darkness, but this does not center in the same world. We have vampires in this book, so this is a fun one because it does have a vampire romance going on, and it also starts off very quickly where there's like a marriage of convenience happening, like an arranged marriage, to a man who she does not like. The main character, Isolde, I don't know how to pronounce her name. She has to marry this vampire king, Adrian, in order to like end this like really long war that's been going on between these two kingdoms. And in order to save her people, in order to please her father, she decides to marry him. They have an attraction to each other, but they also know that they're like sworn enemies because they're from enemy kingdoms, so they're not supposed to like each other. We have, again, a lot of secrets that are being spilled. We have a lot of kingdom politics. We have a really cool dynamic of vampires and their world. It's different from other vampire books that I've read, and it's really good. It is a vampire romance book, so you're gonna get the blood, the bites, the sunlight, all of the stuff that comes with vampires. You're gonna get that in this book series. So, and I think this is just book 1 that's out so far. I don't think book 2 is out yet. So if you're interested in a vampire enemies to lovers romance, then this is your book. And last up on my list is A Lady's Guide to Fortune Hunting by Sophie Irwin. This is her debut novel, and it is another historical romance. I love this book so much. I definitely annotated it, took my time reading this. It is so funny. It's definitely a romantic comedy, and it reminded me a lot of The Princess Diaries and Bridgerton, and it just was really sweet. We have our main heroine, Kitty, who has no money. Her parents are dead. It's just her and her sister trying to like live in the world, and she needs to marry for money. That's how it is back then. She either needed to marry for money, or her and her sisters would all be separated and have to work and become like governesses or maids or something. So her only option as the eldest sister is to marry rich. So she goes to London, to high society for the season, and she is determined to marry someone wealthy enough to provide for her and her sisters. And she sets her eyes immediately on this boy who is quite wealthy, but the older brother has an eye on her. He has an idea that she is kind of like a gold digger, only marrying his younger brother for money. And so he convinces her to not marry his younger brother, and in return he will help her find someone wealthy enough to marry so that they can both get what they want. He can have his brother safe from marrying Kitty, and Kitty can find someone to marry that can provide for her and her sisters. It goes from there. It is funny, it is cute, it is witty. There's a lot of great quotes in here. We have the main guy, Lord Radcliffe, who really has a lot of judgment over Kitty and her situation in life, but again, as a man, he doesn't really have the understanding or the right to judge her. So we have a lot of prejudice going back and forth. This one really does remind me the most of Pride and Prejudice, but it was a great, refreshing book. And I think anyone that loves enemies to lovers, a clean romance, there is no spice here, it's just a lot of angst and banter, would really enjoy this book. And I would recommend it to everybody. I cannot wait to see more books from her. But that is pretty much my list of enemies to lovers books that I've read recently. Really love this trope. I hope to read more in the future, but that is all I have for today. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed this list. If you have any recommendations on enemies to lovers tropes, please leave them down in the comments. As you can see, I really like fantasy. I really like historical romance. I'm not really into contemporary that much, but I will read them occasionally. But if you guys have any recommendations of this trope, please let me know. I would love to hear your thoughts. But that is going to be it for today's video. Thank you guys so much for watching. And until next time, I will see you in my next video.